We put on a sort of brave-faced stoicism through treatment. The treatment's done.
The silence inside the hospital corridor was unbearable. Every second felt heavier than the last as Prince William stood frozen, waiting for words he had quietly feared for weeks. The air was thick with tension, not the kind that fades, but the kind that changes everything once spoken. Just minutes ago, doctors finally confirmed the truth. A truth that no royal title, no palace wall, and no public smile could protect them from. Princess Catherine, known to the world for her strength, grace, and unwavering composure, was facing a reality far more serious than anyone had been prepared to admit. Behind the closed doors of careful statements and reassuring smiles, concern had been growing, silently, painfully, and relentlessly. Those close to the couple say William sensed it long before the confirmation came. He saw it in the exhaustion she tried to hide, in the quiet moments when her strength wavered, in the pauses that spoke louder than words ever could. And now, the fear he carried in his heart had been spoken aloud by the very people entrusted to protect her. Health doctors delivered the update gently, but there was no softening its weight. The room reportedly fell silent. For William, the moment was devastating. This wasn't about duty or the crown or public expectations. This was about the woman he loves, the mother of his children, his constant through every storm. Outside, the world remained unaware. Inside, everything had changed, and as the reality settled in, one question echoed through the palace halls. How much more can she endure, and what will this mean for the future of the monarchy? The atmosphere inside the palace had changed in a way that words could barely explain. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but heavy, as if the air itself carried the weight of something unspoken. For Prince William, every step felt slower, every breath more deliberate. The confirmation he had just received lingered in his mind, refusing to fade. It wasn't the kind of news that could be processed quickly. It settled deeply, reshaping thoughts, priorities, and emotions all at once. The doctors had spoken with care, their voices calm and professional, yet nothing could soften the truth behind their words. What they shared was not a momentary concern, but a reality that required patience, strength, and acceptance. Catherine remained composed, as she always had been. Even in moments of uncertainty, she carried herself with quiet dignity. But behind her calm expression, there was vulnerability, not fear, but awareness. Awareness that life had shifted in a way that could not be undone. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and nodded gently, absorbing everything with grace. Her strength did not come from denial, but from courage. And in that moment, it became clear just how deeply she understood the road ahead. William watched her closely, his heart heavy with emotions he struggled to name. He had faced pressure since childhood, had lived under the watchful eyes of the world, yet nothing compared to this. This was personal. This was the woman he loved, the mother of his children, the one who steadied him through every storm. The fear he carried was not loud or panicked. It was quiet, constant, and deeply rooted. He wished he could take the burden from her, even for a moment. Outside the room, life continued as if nothing had changed. Staff moved through corridors with practiced calm, unaware of the emotional weight pressing against the palace walls. Schedules were adjusted quietly. Conversations softened. Everyone sensed that something delicate was unfolding, even if no one spoke it aloud. There was a collective instinct to protect, to shield, to give space where it was needed most. As the hours passed, the reality of the situation began to settle. This was not about urgency or alarm, but about endurance, about listening to the body, about understanding limits. And for Catherine, it meant allowing herself moments of rest without guilt, something she had rarely permitted herself before. For William, it meant learning to slow down, to place love above duty, even when duty had shaped every part of his life. Their thoughts naturally turned to their children. How much should they know? How could they preserve their sense of safety and normalcy? William felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier now than ever before. He wanted to protect their innocence, to shield them from worry, even as he himself struggled to process the reality unfolding. In the quiet moments, when the room was still and the world felt far away, Catherine reached for his hand. The gesture was small yet powerful. It reminded him that they were not alone in this, that whatever came next, they would face it together. There was comfort in that truth, even amid uncertainty. Outside speculation had begun to stir, though nothing had yet been confirmed. The public remained unaware of the depth of what was happening behind palace doors. But subtle changes did not go unnoticed. Reduced appearances, carefully worded statements, a gentle shift in tone that hinted at something more beneath the surface. Those closest to the couple understood the sensitivity of the moment. Loyalty ran deep. Privacy was protected. No one wanted to be the source of unnecessary concern or misunderstanding. The focus remained on care, stability, and ensuring that Catherine felt supported in every possible way. As evening approached, the palace seemed to exhale. Light filtered softly through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The day had been emotionally heavy, yet there was a quiet sense of resolve in the air. This was not the end of something, it was an adjustment, a moment of recalibration. William sat beside Catherine, their presence together speaking louder than any words. He knew the path ahead might not be easy, but he also knew they would walk it side by side. Strength, he realized, did not always look like endurance. Sometimes it looked like vulnerability, patience, and the courage to pause. There was no announcement that day. No public acknowledgement. And yet, within those walls, everything had changed. The future would require understanding, compassion, and time, qualities that could not be rushed. As night fell, the palace lights softened and a rare stillness settled over the rooms. For now, that stillness offered comfort. It allowed space to breathe, to reflect, and to hold on to hope. Because even in uncertainty, there remained something powerful, love, steady, and unwavering, guiding them forward through the unknown. The morning light crept softly through the palace windows, but it did little to lift the weight that lingered in the air. Everything felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed out of respect for what was unfolding behind closed doors. William had barely slept. His thoughts circled endlessly, returning again and again to the same quiet fear, not panic, not despair, but the aching awareness that life had shifted in a way that could never fully be undone. Catherine woke calmly, her expression gentle yet thoughtful. There was no dramatics, no visible distress. Instead, there was acceptance, not of defeat, but of change. She moved slowly, deliberately, as though every action now carried deeper meaning. Even the smallest gestures seemed intentional, as if she were learning how to move forward in a new rhythm she hadn't chosen but was ready to face. William watched her closely, noticing things he might once have overlooked, the way she paused slightly before standing, the thoughtful stillness in her eyes, the quiet strength that had always defined her but now carried a deeper gravity. He wanted to speak, to ask questions that had no easy answers, but words felt fragile. Some moments demanded silence more than reassurance. Inside the palace, a subtle transformation was underway. Advisors spoke in softer tones. Schedules were reviewed with unusual care. Plans that once felt routine were now reconsidered through a more human lens. The priority had shifted, not toward appearances or expectation, but toward balance, stability, and well-being. For years, Catherine had carried herself with unwavering composure, rarely allowing the world to see the toll of responsibility. Now, those closest to her recognized the quiet courage it took to continue forward with grace. She was not seeking sympathy. She was seeking understanding from those around her, and from herself. William felt a growing determination settle within him. Whatever lay ahead, he would ensure she was never alone in it. Titles, tradition, and public roles faded into the background. In their place stood something far more important: partnership. A shared promise to protect one another through uncertainty. Beyond the palace walls, subtle signs of change were beginning to surface. Engagements were adjusted, public appearances reconsidered, statements carefully crafted to offer reassurance without revealing more than necessary. The balance between transparency and privacy became delicate, almost fragile. Those closest to the family sensed the shift. Conversations became more intentional. Smiles were gentler. There was a collective understanding that this was a moment requiring patience, not pressure. Support flowed quietly, without spectacle. As the day unfolded, William found himself reflecting on the past, on moments of laughter, resilience, and growth that had shaped their journey. He remembered how Catherine had always been a steady presence, even during the most demanding times. Now it was his turn to be that anchor. In quieter moments, doubts crept in. Questions without answers lingered in his mind. How would this affect their children? How would they navigate the public eye while protecting what mattered most? The responsibility felt immense, yet he knew avoidance was not an option. Strength, he realized, did not mean having all the answers. It meant showing up even when the path ahead was unclear. Catherine, sensing his thoughts, offered reassurance in small ways. A look, a touch, a calm smile that spoke louder than words. She reminded him, without saying it, that hope still existed. That life, even when altered, could remain meaningful and full. As evening approached once more, the palace grew quieter. The long corridors echoed softly, and the fading light painted gentle shadows along the walls. It was in this stillness that reflection took hold. Not despair, but acceptance. Not fear, but resolve. There was no dramatic announcement, no sudden revelation. Only a mutual understanding that the days ahead would require patience, flexibility, and trust. The future might look different than expected, but it was not without promise. William sat beside Catherine once again, the world outside momentarily forgotten. In that shared silence, they found reassurance, not in certainty, but in togetherness. The challenges ahead no longer felt insurmountable when faced side by side. Beyond the palace gates, life continued. People moved through their days unaware of the quiet transformation taking place within those walls. Yet something had shifted, subtly, profoundly. A reminder that even within the most structured lives, vulnerability can emerge, reshaping everything it touches. As night settled in, a sense of calm replaced the earlier tension. The path ahead remained unclear, but one truth stood firm. Whatever came next would be met with courage, dignity, and love. And in that quiet resolve, a new of resilience began, not defined by fear, but by the strength found in standing together when it matters most. As the days quietly passed, the atmosphere inside the palace shifted once again. What had once felt heavy now carried a different kind of weight. Not fear, but awareness. A sense that life had entered a new phase. One that demanded patience, understanding, and strength in ways no one had anticipated. For William, each morning began with reflection. The world outside continued its rhythm, but within those walls, time felt slower, more deliberate. Catherine remained calm yet thoughtful. Her presence continued to radiate grace, but there was a noticeable depth to her silence, not emptiness, but contemplation. She spent more moments near the windows, watching the light change throughout the day, as though grounding herself in the simple certainty that life still moved forward. There was comfort in that constancy. There was comfort in that constancy, even when so much else felt uncertain. William found himself watching her more closely than ever before. Not out of worry alone, but admiration. Her quiet strength had always been a constant in his life, yet now it felt amplified. She carried herself with dignity, never asking for attention or reassurance, even as her world subtly shifted. It reminded him how much she had given over the years, not only to him, but to the role she had embraced so wholeheartedly. Within the palace, adjustments continued quietly. Conversations were gentler. Expectations softened. There was a collective understanding that this was a time for compassion rather than pressure. Advisors worked carefully behind the scenes, ensuring that every decision reflected care rather than urgency. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. The public, unaware of the full reality, began to sense a change. Appearances became fewer, messages more measured. Yet there was no panic, only curiosity, tempered by respect. Those closest to the family were determined to protect their privacy. Knowing that moments like these required space to breathe, William often found himself thinking about the future, not in terms of duty but of balance. How could he ensure stability while also honoring the humanity of those he loved? The weight of leadership had always been part of his life, but now it felt deeply personal. The decisions ahead were no longer theoretical. They were real, emotional, and close to home. Catherine, aware of his inner struggle, offered quiet reassurance. A gentle touch on his arm. A calm smile when words felt unnecessary. These small gestures carried immense meaning, grounding him when uncertainty threatened to overwhelm. Together, they shared an understanding that strength did not always mean pushing forward. Sometimes, it meant allowing space to heal. As days turned into evenings, a subtle calm began to take hold. The palace no longer felt suspended in tension but settled into a quieter rhythm. This was not resignation but acceptance. A recognition that life's most challenging moments often arrive without warning, asking not for perfection, but for presence. William spent time reflecting on the values he hoped to pass on: compassion, resilience, honesty. He realized that these moments, though difficult, were shaping not only their future but the example they would set for others. Leadership, he understood, was as much about vulnerability as it was about strength. Catherine, too, seemed to draw strength from reflection. She embraced stillness, allowing herself moments of peace without guilt. Those close to her noticed a calm determination, a quiet resilience that spoke louder than words ever could. She was not retreating, she was gathering herself. The world beyond the palace gates continued its pace, unaware of the emotional shifts unfolding within. Yet something had undeniably changed. A deeper sense of humanity now guided each step taken inside those walls. As evening settled once more, William and Catherine shared a quiet moment together. No words were needed. The understanding between them was complete. They had faced uncertainty, and while the road ahead remained unclear, they were no longer afraid of it. The silence around them was no longer heavy. It was reassuring. A reminder that even in the most uncertain moments, connection can bring clarity. What lay ahead would require patience, courage, and compassion. But as they stood together, it became clear that they were ready to face whatever came next, not as individuals weighed down by expectation, but as partners united by trust and resilience. The palace lights dimmed softly as night fell, wrapping the space in calm. And within that calm, a quiet promise lingered, that no matter what the future held, they would move forward together, one steady step at a time. The night settled quietly over the palace, wrapping its walls in a calm that felt almost sacred. There was no urgency now, no hurried footsteps or whispered conversations. Instead, there was a stillness that invited reflection, the kind that arrives only after something significant has shifted. Inside, the atmosphere felt different from before. Not lighter, not heavier, but changed in a way that could not be undone. William stood near the window, watching the faint glow of the city lights beyond the gates. His thoughts moved slowly, deliberately, as if his mind was finally allowing itself to rest. The days behind him had been filled with emotion, responsibility, and moments that would linger long after this closed. Yet within the quiet, he felt a surprising sense of clarity beginning to form. Catherine sat nearby, peaceful yet alert, her presence grounding. There was strength in her calm, a quiet reassurance that did not demand attention. She'd always carried herself with grace, but now that grace felt deeper, forged through acceptance rather than expectation. She was not defined by uncertainty. She was shaped by resilience. In that stillness, neither felt the need to speak. Their shared silence carried understanding, trust, and an unspoken promise that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. It was in these quiet moments that the truest form of strength revealed itself, not through action, but through presence. The days that followed moved gently forward. Life within the palace adjusted naturally, without announcement or explanation. Priorities shifted. Time was given where it was needed most. There was no rush to return to routine, no pressure to appear unchanged. Instead, there was intention. Thoughtful, careful, human. Those around them noticed the difference. There was a softness in the air, a sense of respect for the space this moment required. Advisors spoke thoughtfully. Staff moved with calm purpose. Everyone understood that this was not a moment to fill with noise, but one to protect with care. William found himself reflecting often on the meaning of strength. For so long, he had believed it meant endurance, standing firm regardless of weight or cost. Now, he began to understand that true strength also lived in vulnerability, in choosing compassion over certainty, and in allowing space for healing. Catherine, too, embraced this new rhythm. She allowed herself moments of rest without guilt, moments of stillness without explanation. In doing so, she revealed a quiet courage that inspired those around her. It was not the absence of challenge that defined her, but the grace with which she met it. Together, they began to envision a future shaped not by expectation, but by intention. A future where presence mattered more than perfection, and where connection took precedence over appearance. The path ahead remained uncertain, yet it no longer felt intimidating. Beyond the palace walls, life continued as always. The world turned, unaware of the emotional transformation unfolding within. But for those inside, everything had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but profoundly. There was no grand declaration, no defining moment for the world to witness. Instead, there was a quiet understanding that something meaningful had taken root. A deeper awareness of what truly mattered. A renewed sense of purpose grounded in empathy and strength. As evening fell once more, soft light filled the rooms, casting gentle shadows along the walls. The day came to a close not with finality, but with reassurance. Whatever lay ahead would be faced with honesty, patience, and unity. William and Catherine stood together, not as symbols or figures, but as two people navigating a deeply human experience. Their bond, strengthened by vulnerability, felt unshakable. In that calm, the future no longer seemed daunting. It felt open, shaped by choice, guided by care, and anchored in love. And as the palace settled into quiet once more, one truth remained clear. Even in moments of uncertainty, there is strength in togetherness, and hope in simply moving forward one steady step at a time.